You guys, I was talking in one of my last videos about my dad's painting business and my painting business out in Arizona. And there's a few things I kind of left out about it, but I want to talk more, get more into details about why, you know, people think it's as easy as starting a business. It's just, okay, I'm going to, um, whatever, let's go with house paint. I'm going to be a house painter. You know, if you're doing it on the side and you're not really looking to do it full time or anything, it ain't no big deal. You'll do a house or do whatever painting you're going to do every now and then. It won't be no big deal. But if you're going to do it for a living, um, the first place is you got to start. If you're going to be what they, and I mean society, considers a legitimate business, and that's what you got to go by because society is where you get your money and society is where you're going to sell your product to or your labor. So I was telling you guys how I ran my business without licensing, and I did for 15 years. I filed self-employed on all my taxes while I was painting. Never got audited or anything. I did all most of the time. I did my own taxes. Uh, Dealt with it all myself. Uh, when we let me just I got to start here. When my father and my mom and dad decided after I had I moved to Florida, and the next winter that came up, my dad wanted to go to Florida during the winter because he was a painter, but he worked for the oil companies, Standard, Fina, Sunoco, and he had a crew of guys that they went all over Indiana, Illinois, and Ohio painting gas stations. That's all they did. They were union painters. That's all they did. He did that for decades. Uh, there was only one guy hiring him in the company, and that was the guy that owned the company. And he was the top guy. Other than that, everybody worked under him. And he decided we had been to Florida many times, folks. We traveled every summer, and we either went towards Florida or we went out west. And he decided that after the next winter, because he was usually laid off during the winter, and he would draw unemployment for 2 or 3 months because it was too cold to be painting, especially oil-based paint. Um, but the following winter, after I went down there, about a year later, he wanted to come down. So he called me and he goes, "Look, I'm going to load up the motor home and I'm going to bring the motor home down there and live in it." And he goes, "But will you come up here and get me?" He goes, and help me to drive the motor home back down there. And what we ended up doing is towing my car. We put a tow hitch on the front of my car and pulled it behind our motor home, and we drove it back down. Well, luckily we did. First trip down, we blew the motor about halfway down, so we had to turn around and go back home until they got the motor fixed. But they finally got down there, and my dad wanted him and his brother was living down there during the summer or winter months too, out of Tennessee. And so they decided, you know what, let's start a house paint business. They started going out. Got business cards made. Started advertising in the yellow pages and uh, newspapers. Started going around construction sites and talking to builder contractors and stuff, and started getting work. Got it going. Well, it wasn't long. Uh, Government showed up on one of their jobs and asked them where their licenses was. Somebody called on them, and it was one of the other commercial or one of the other workers that knew we weren't that knew he wasn't licensed. Turned his ass in. So they came. Came to talk to my dad, gave him a fine for working without a license. So he said, all right. He went down, paid it. And then he started looking into it. He just wanted to get a license to paint houses. He goes down, talks to the government. The government tells him he cannot get a license to just paint houses. He has to have a builder's contractor's license to be able to paint houses. Now, if you don't know what a builder contractor license is, that's somebody who can build it from the ground up, do all the plumbing, electrical, everything. Somebody who knows all that shit. My dad was a painter. He did not know all that shit. He knew a little bit about a lot of it. But he had a 6th grade education, was all my dad had, because he was born during the Great Depression. And he just wanted to paint houses and have a business. So they kept painting. I was out on a couple of those jobs with him, not all the time at first, but me and my cousins helped him when they had bigger jobs. About the 3rd time they caught my dad, because if they gave him a ticket, he'd just go pay it, just keep going. Well, the 3rd time they said, if we catch you out here doing any more work, we're going to put you in jail. So it was going to take him some kind of a shitload of schooling and all kinds of shit. It would take a couple of years for him to learn all the shit he would have needed to learn to pass that general contractor's license to paint houses. That's why he packed it up. My mom and dad were down there maybe a couple of years, or a year and a half, or 2 years, maybe 3 years. And they said, oh, with this, we're going to Arizona. And my dad's brother didn't go to Arizona, but they took my dad took the name with him, and when he started his business out in Arizona. Now out in Arizona, it was $2,000. That was for the state license. This is what I left out of the last videos when I've talked about this. In order to be a legitimate business, we did work for the government. We did post offices and schools and shit through my dad's business. But he had to be licensed through the state, which it cost about $2,000. He had to be licensed through the Register of Contractors in order to do government work and shit. He had to be, that was $2,500 a year. The license was $2,000 a year. That was $2,500 a year. We had to have $1 million worth of liability insurance on on the company in order to do these jobs to make some good money. Let's see. Oh, we had to be licensed in every city. Every city that we worked in. We lived in Mesa. Well, we had Tempe and Superstition Mountains area, Gold Canyon area. We had Chandler and Coolidge, and we had Phoenix and Greenfield, or not Greenfield, Scottsdale, Paradise Valley, all these cities. Now, the richer areas were like Scottsdale and Paradise Valley. Well, the city license for each city, it depended on how wealthy that city was as to how much you would have to pay each city for that license. It wasn't a one-shot payment. You had to pay a percentage of each one of your jobs. So every job, depending on what Paradise Valley or Scottsdale, Arizona, and Glendale, Arizona, the rich areas up north, buddy, he was paying a big chunk of it. I'd say about probably 5%. So there wasn't a set price for it. Well, everything out there in Arizona was going good. He was paying all this shit. He was making good money. And all of a sudden, they crashed the freaking economy. This is back in the 90s, sometime in the 90s. The housing market just collapsed. No new building was going on at all, and not in Arizona. No new construction. Now, all the smaller companies, we had to deal with these guys that were doing the commercial and industrial and brand new residential shit. All we wanted was the repaints. We didn't want to do none of the new work. We just wanted to do repaints. We could make more money doing repaints than they could ever make doing new work. So all of the smaller companies made deals with these motherfuckers. Look, we won't do your industrial. We won't even bid on your industrial or commercial or new residential. We won't even bid on that shit if somebody calls us. But don't you guys fuck with any repaints. And it was a deal for a long time going on like that out there. Well, as soon as that housing market collapsed, they weren't building no more new anything, no more new industrial shit, no more new residential shit. It just collapsed. Well, guess what? All them big old companies, they catfished the hell out of us. Where we'd have a couple, 2, 3 guys on one house painting it in a day or two. And these guys went in and they would slap 15 guys on one house and painting about 4 hours. Scrape it, caulk it, paint it. They'd be tripping over themselves. And they would cut in our throats. Just to keep their heads above water. That's a fact. And that's what this government will do to you. If they figure out you're making some money, they're going to put some kind of regulations on it. You'll have to get some kind of permits, licensing, something. Once it gets going good enough, they'll start trying to force that shit on you. Now, I was lucky enough to have people that a lot of work I did. My father, if it was his work, I would work under his licensing and insurances and everything. And then I had other painters in town that knew my work, and they would throw jobs at me and let me work under their licenses as well. So I was able to get away with that for 15 years. But as soon as that market collapsed, the economy collapsed back then, none of the small companies could stay up with the big companies. They were ripping through this shit, took it all. And at one time, we were doing multi-million-dollar homes, repaints. So for those of you that think it's just easy and simple to start a business, once you figure out what you're going to do with it, your next step should be, what's it going to take to legally get it in effect, get it going legally. Because if you ain't doing it through the government and you don't have their licensing and you're not going by their regulations, they're going to come in and close you down. If you want any proof of that, talk to the Amish in Pennsylvania and I think in Wyoming. I think there's like 10 states, 10 that are doing this. This ain't nothing new. They've been doing it. And that's when I ask somebody about your licensing stuff. And they kind of laugh it off. Well, laugh it off. Eventually, you're going to wind up with a ticket, is what they call it. They can even send it to you in the mail. You just have to go pay it then. And especially if you have one employee, you got to have liability insurance. And if that employee gets hurt and you don't have liability insurance, he's going to own your business. I used to laugh at him and I'd tell him, when you set that ladder, if we're running up and down big old extension ladders or something, I'd tell them, look, when you set that ladder, or don't you even go up that ladder without checking it, making sure it's set right. Because when you go up that son of a bitch, if you fall off of it, you're fired before you hit the ground. Know that. And I meant it. I told them guys that I ain't going to pay you shit if you fall and hurt yourself. That's you know better than that. And at one time, I had 38 guys under me through other businesses, not of my own. I couldn't have done that without being licensed, bonded, and insured. But the companies that I have done work for, I had 38 guys working under me, and most of them were crackheads and drunks. Barely get them to show up 3 or 4 days a week. So, people, that was just another one of my rants about licensing and regulations. That's how they got my driver's license, my CDL too. Took that away from me. God loves you guys. I love you as well. Seek Jesus' path. I don't care what other path you're trying to take. If you ain't seeking the way to the Father, how successful can it be? And for how long? Love you guys.